15Five is a company that every single person that I've met that works with them leaves me with a smile on my face and an interesting thought to consider in the coming hours or days. I say that having encountered them at different events and having had the pleasure to be on the phone call with recently Jennie Yang, the Director of Customer Success, and Shane Metcalf, who is the co-founder and Chief Culture Officer. And honestly, I was just sad that there was an end point to that conversation because I could have talked to them for hours. And I'm excited today to bring them on stage with me to continue that conversation. So if you'll please welcome them with a standing ovation.
All right, so I'm so happy to be here and am very honored to open up our panel today with a brief meditation. So I invite you to put both feet on the ground and just settle into your seat, and in your own time, start closing your eyes. Inviting you to take the deepest breath you've taken all day. And allowing yourself to drop into your own presence. And just noticing if any sensations arise. And if you're noticing that you are following a thought trail, just bring it back to your body. Bring your awareness back to the breath. Knowing that at any point in time throughout the day, you can always choose to go back to your breath. And whenever you're ready, start opening up your eyes, coming back to the present moment and back to the room.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to be more present in the room. I'm really excited to talk with you both a little bit more about how we can help people be more fully present at work. I would love it, Jennie, if you would start off by sharing a little bit about what mental health means to you.
Before you go there, I would feel a little more psychologically safe if we could get the projector turned off so there's not shining in our eyes. Is that possible? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Willow. So I'm going to share a little bit about my story as to why mental health is so important to me. So I grew up on the East Coast, and right out of college, started my career, moved from Atlanta to Washington, D.C., and I was hustling. This was 12 years ago, and I was in the grind. We were coming out of the economic downturn, and I just kept working myself to the grind that my husband reminded me that 10 years ago, I actually, in my first year of my career, had severe pain in my neck, shooting nerve pain. It was called occipital neuralgia. And I could not get out of bed for at least an hour every day for 4 months. How did this happen? It was induced by stress. And so I realized that I was not taking care of my body. I was not taking care of both my mental and physical health on the onset of my career. And of course, I continued down that path. I went into management consulting. I was traveling 4 days a week. And as an out of this toxic work culture, I thought about my career. Where did I want to go? And that led me to the West Coast here in the Bay Area to get into tech. So I landed at my first tech startup 6 years ago. And guess what? It was another toxic work culture. And I became so fearful of showing up at work every day. I would just always go into this little ball or go to the bathroom and cry because someone yelled at me that because my presentation was not ready for the customer, according to that person. And I realized at one point that I had to get help, that actually I was in a depressed state. And since then, 4 years ago, I've been on this healing path of really understanding my own self and loving my own self, caring for my own self, and recognizing that at the end of the day, it's me accepting my own self and creating that psychological safety within myself. So I'm very excited to share, some ways in which you all can start building more rapport with self, to be able to show up more fully. I think this conversation around psychological safety is stemming from this definition from 1990 around psychological safety is being able to show up without fear of consequence of one's self-image or status or career. And so we hope to leave you with some practical tools and tips, both for you as an individual as well as an organization, to bring back to your teams.
Shane, I'm curious to hear you speak a little bit more about your relationship with mental health, both personally and professionally.
Great. Thanks, Willow. And first of all, I just want to say thanks to Robin and Willow for having us. It's a real honor to sponsor Responsive. Come say hello to us at our booth. It's kind of fun. We're the only booth. That's cool. Captive audience. Our purpose, our reason for building 15.5 is to create space for people to become their best selves. We believe that there is a revolution happening in business where it is actually becoming an economic imperative that companies start to think about the internal states of their people. That, the reductive models of business we kind of gained from the military, from the Industrial Revolution, stripped us of our humanity. It said that who we are as human beings is not important. What is important is our productivity and us showing up to the office and us doing our jobs. What's really cool is that as automation is taking over, as the rise of machines are replacing so much of what we're currently doing as humans, the most valuable thing that we then have is our creativity. And that is only going to increase. And creativity does not thrive when we're constricted by shame and fear. And so our job as business leaders is to create environments that begin to loosen the grip of fear on our minds, our hearts, our bodies. And that is when we're going to be able to show up as our best selves. One of the things that I really like to think about is this idea that healed people heal people and hurt people hurt people. That whatever our center of gravity is, we're going to pull people into it. Just everywhere we go, our energetic presence is so powerful. It's magnetic. And so similarly, healed organizations heal people and hurt organizations hurt people. And just it's like there's all these like flowering businesses that are starting to be led by healed people that are, managers are doing their own work, are saying, oh, wow, I need to actually take full accountability for my experience in life and do some of the shadow work, do some of the inner work. And then all of a sudden, Jennie's team, and I can attest to this, is like, oh my God, Jennie's one of the best managers I've ever had in my life. She actually cares about me as a human being. And that produces a very different quality of performance and engagement, which produces very different financial outcomes for our companies. Because there's great economic power in high trust, high vulnerability organizations. So that's a little bit of how I think about this stuff. And then my own journey is of I've been on a healing journey. I grew up dysfunctional, loving, but dysfunctional family in a poor town in New Mexico. And, was around a lot of gang violence growing up, a lot of racism. And So it's been this incredible journey of like, okay, cool. Well, I want to heal. I want to feel better. I want to increase the amount of time that I feel good in my own being. And I kind of dropped out of the business world for most of my 20s. And I took the path less traveled. I did every frickin' workshop on transformation in the Bay Area that I could get my hands on. And there's a lot of them here. And then I was broke too. And I was like, shit, like, I should have just gotten a job at Bain and worked 100 hours a week, like some of my friends. But then it's really been fascinating because starting 15.5, it was like, oh, wow, okay, cool. I have carte blanche to build a culture from the ground up. And it turns out I have all these like interpersonal tools and technologies that I've gained from the weird shit that I've done. And now I can apply those in building more of a community than a company, where we can facilitate, we can provide systems and structures that create connection, that have opportunities for people to reveal themselves, to tell our unique human stories. Because I think that until we feel seen, until we can share our struggles, we are not going to feel psychologically safe.
Absolutely. Thank you. What is it that you think creates a space where people can share their truer selves?
Well, I think as a leader, and I would say a leader applying to every human in this room, every single individual, is just showing who you are authentically, also requires a level of vulnerability. So Brene Brown, PhD and researcher on the topic of shame, she defines vulnerability as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So if you show up in that way and having the courage and not being afraid of sharing your truth telling, that sets the stage and the tone for other people to be able to show up in that way and share their truths.
Ask questions. Questions are the single greatest, most powerful tool that any of us have to create space for us to become our best selves, to live an inquisitive life. And so, this shows up in a lot of different ways with 15.5, and we built a product that's all based on asking questions. But then we do a lot of other stuff that's outside of the product, that transcends the product. Every Friday, so Friday morning, just a little bit ago, we have a company-wide boost where somebody leads it for the month. They're the question master, and they ask a non-business related question, like, what was one of the most impactful stories of your childhood, like book or movies that really shaped you? Or if you had, $100 million in the bank account, what would you do? Or what was one of the hardest things about your high school, about going to high school? And then everybody goes around and answers. And it's amazing because at work, we see each other as professionals. We have the professional mask on. But creating consistent space to be able to tell our human stories, that is, I think, what really starts to unlock. And that's what has us start to feel like, oh, okay, cool. I am seen here. And then also using questions around, what do you want? Where do you see yourself in 3 years, 5 years? Do you feel like you have a calling? What do you really want to do? And that's when we start to uncover our deeper motivations. And then you can use your business as a vehicle to help realize the dreams of your people. And when your people trust that that's actually what's going on, you're going to have unbelievably high motivation. In 8 years, we've lost 5 people to voluntary turnover, and only 2 of those have been leaving for another job. And so, care about your people, love your people, help them live their best life. And so much of that just starts with intention, with just actually orienting that that's the context, that's part of the greater context of why we're doing business.
Here's something fun that my team at 15.5 did about a month ago. So we were on a team retreat, and one of the managers on the team, she had decided to create an evening activity, a team talent show. So when it comes to
I feel less psychologically safe already just hearing talent show. I'm like, oh God, I'm so glad I wasn't there.
So it actually created existential crises, and people were really afraid, like, what is the talent that I'm going to share? But it really allowed people to go into that inquiry of what part of myself that the team doesn't really know about or I don't typically show during the workday do I want to demonstrate in a 5-minute presentation or a dance routine or just a silly skit. So that in itself, any team activities of being able to provide that space for your team members to really show up as their full selves.
Well, and I think this is such an important point because, there's a great Helen Keller quote, and she says that safety is a superstition. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. And, so it's kind of almost in contradiction to, we need to create psychological safety. We need psychological safety. Yes. And, if Willow was committed to only feeling safe, she wouldn't have gotten up on stage. Like, the journey of public speaking is one of the most terrifying, revealing of our deepest insecurities and then bearing them in front of strangers. And, so our comfort zones are not psychological safety. We can really deceive ourselves in thinking that the trick is always to be comfortable. That's not the thing. We want to push ourselves out of our comfort, and that doesn't always feel safe. And so it's kind of a paradox, because we also need to feel safe in order to get up on stage, to do a talent show, but it requires feeling unsafe to do that.
I think it's a bit about feeling safe to take a risk, safe enough to try things. So at Responsive Conference this year, rather than doing a happy hour at a normal bar, I decided to try something new, and I put together what I called Failure Night. And it was an open mic night where I got people together and asked them to come on stage and share about a time that they have tried something and failed, whether it was personally or professionally. And I was honestly a little bit scared that people wouldn't come, especially after such an emotionally intensive conference. And not only was the room completely full, but people shared just from the bottom of their hearts times that they'd failed, family members that they'd ruined relationships with, businesses that tanked. And the result of it is that people were willing to step up and be more honest the next day. People said that they felt so safe because of that experience, hearing other people say that they had messed up and failed, that the next day they were more open to the content of the conference, and that allowed it to affect them more. And that really stuck to that point of, it's not about necessarily staying in your comfort zone, but it is about feeling safe enough to take a risk. And so what does it look like to create spaces where people can be creative and try new things and come up with new ideas? And I'd love to hear some practical tools or techniques that you have, approaches to supporting your teams in being creative and taking these risks and really celebrating that.
So actually, we have 2 weekly stand-ups as a team. And at the beginning of stand-up, we, the other day, one of the managers led this improv exercise of, hey, I'm going to start with this sentence, and I'm going to ask that you popcorn it to someone else so that they can continue on with the story. And so being able to create that yes and type of dialogue enables people to realize that their idea isn't going to be right or wrong. It's an idea. Just throw it out there. So that was one tactical practice of ours.
Great.
Ray Dalio, in his book Principles, talks about how at Bridgewater, which is his hedge fund, they have a failure wall. And that is where you actually, every week, it's about putting up, what did you fail at? And so normalize the conversation around failure. Just like the failure night, all of a sudden people are like, holy shit, the parts of me that I feel so ashamed about because of my interpretation of failure. And so I have to construct an entire identity around hiding those parts. And please, I hope none of you see the places where I feel like a failure. Then all of a sudden you realize, oh, actually, failure and the parts that I'm scared of being seen in can be met with not only approval, but with support and encouragement and a tenderness. That changes the game. That then has people be like, oh, I can be more honest. And when we're more honest, We're going to tell the truth about what are we struggling with, where are we stuck, what's not going well in our roles. Because we have to decondition ourselves about lying at work. You know, like we have of hundreds, thousands of years of lying to authority. Because do not tell your boss the truth or they will kill you, they will fire you, they will, demote you. And so we have a lot of old conditioning to undo. And it's not going to happen in one moment. It happens gradually. Every single conversation where we can normalize these things, where we can start to learn from our failures, where leaders can set the example and say, look, I don't know everything. I screw up. That's when we can really start to change the conversation internally. And you want systems and process around this, because if you just leave it to default, it goes back towards the opposite of truth telling, towards concealing and towards hiding. And so you need systems that regularly prompt people to share these things.
I think it's really great that you have that built into your meetings. It's something that we do on our team meetings. We have a distributed workforce. Some are here in the Bay. We've got people in several different time zones, and we start every meeting with a personal check-in. And sometimes it is, what's a book you're reading? Sometimes it is, what's something you're really challenged with right now? And that's created such a space that we've been more open sharing, like, hey, I have this frustration, or this other thing is coming up. And when I've been talking with other leaders recently, I've noticed that there's a hesitation to share or to even ask questions that are too personal about people's mental health. There's this fear of HIPAA, which in the workplace, we don't actually have to comply with HIPAA because we are not medical professionals, luckily. But I'm curious if one of you would be willing to talk to, I think, Shane, you mentioned something about this the other day. We're not their therapists. And so where is that line of really caring about the human and being able to manage the project flow that you have going on and the workflow that you're trying to maintain? And where's that line, and how do you work with it?
Well, I think we need to connect the dots that our internal states influence our external productivity. That we are foolish, we have been foolish in being like, you leave your life outside of the office. But if something's going on that's consuming my attention outside of work, I'm going to bring that. I'm not going to do my best work. And so it is a delicate balance, because things like HIPAA, things like it's not legal to ask people about mental health, is because we've been trying to protect people from being discriminated against. That's the positive intention about it, of saying, oh, you have PTSD? Oh, I think there might be a better place for you to work. And like, we don't want to deal with that. And that's the positive aspect of it, of really respecting people's sovereignty and privacy, which we want to do. We really want to create freedom for people to be who they are and to have their boundaries. And we want to be that healing organization. We want to have it be okay to not be okay. We want to make fear safe. We want to make it okay for us to actually be seen in the things that we are struggling with, and just to be witnessed. And then the nervous system relaxes and unwinds a little bit. And then actually the brain starts to process information more efficiently. When we're in a fight or flight state of our brain, I just learned this from Rajni Yogi. When we're in fight or flight, it's actually connected to our ears, to the ear bones, and it actually turns down our hearing. That's why if you've ever been in a fight with somebody and you're like screaming at them, like, you're not listening to me, like literally they are not listening. Like literally we stop processing external information when we're in fight or flight. And most of us, to some degree, have our brains in a lot of kind of stuck in fight or flight survival mode. And that's why we want to create organizations where we're engineering positive brain states. And that can be done like every Monday morning. We start with a 5-minute gratitude meditation, because gratitude, focusing on what we're grateful for, literally begins to rewire our brain, redirects the way that we process information.
I have a question for all of you. Who here has been interrupted in a meeting by a coworker or a person in your life? Yeah, it seems like almost the whole room. So that for me personally is a huge trigger where as a middle child between two brothers, I never felt like my voice was heard. And anytime I'd speak up, I felt like I was shut down. So, in the workplace, it shows up for me as an adult where someone speaks over me as I'm talking, and then I literally automatically default to getting really, really small. And it's this neural patterning that kicks in. It's me in flight mode. And oftentimes I'll have to get out of the room and go to the bathroom and cry. And I share this story with you because I realize that it is the actual neural patterning of being in that fear state that enables me to just go flight. But in terms of going back to the question and inquiry about therapy, I realize that that's the own work that I need to do personally, the inner work that I need to heal. And so I had an open discussion, actually it was with my manager, this was in a team meeting with our leadership team. And afterwards, we talked about what happened. And he held space for me to share my experience. And I told him, I did not feel psychologically safe in the room when you spoke over me. And so by having that open conversation and sharing my truth with him and giving him more context as to why, he asked me, okay, then what do you need from me? And I asked him noticing and having awareness in those meetings of when he might be interrupting others, or to tone it down. And I think the other part of it was he equipped me with this tool of, in meetings, calling people out and noticing, hey, I'm noticing that you're talking above this other person. I also have this tool, I've been empowered with this tool of saying, hey, do more of this and do less of that. So I think it's part of having that clearing conversation as well, and realizing that you are actually your own therapist.
Absolutely. I would love to hear from you something that somebody at work has done, whether it's a leader or a coworker, that made you feel safe at work, if anybody would be willing to share.
So I'm a little under the weather, so I'll do my best. But my manager starts every meeting with a whip around, which is where we all have a set number of minutes to talk about something that we won, something that we failed at, and something that we learned. And they don't have to be connected, but often they are. And the safety that my manager creates, and I sort of thought that it was a company-wide practice because she's honestly my favorite manager ever. And I was sitting around just a couple of days ago talking with somebody who was visiting from another office, and I told her about this whip around, and she's the director of engineering in that office. And I told her about that. She's like, oh my God, I've got to write that down. So she's going to go and take that and integrate that into her one-on-ones and into her meetings. And the feeling of safety of knowing that my boss fucks up is amazing. Hearing that, she forgot to send an important detail on this huge project that she's working on makes me feel so much better that I sent an email to the sales team with draft in the subject line. And it's a wonderful experience.
Absolutely. See, it goes to what you were saying before about when leaders are willing to share times that they've failed, people feel more comfortable exploring in their work. I know I had one recently, actually. I was struggling in a conversation with someone where I was being talked over quite a bit and where I was having my ideas discredited, and it was a challenging experience for me. And I brought this to Robin. And instead of Robin stepping in to say, I'm going to do this thing, or here's the next step, Robin said, what do you want to do? What do you need? How did this feel for you? How can I support you? I can step in if that's what you want. But just knowing that in that moment I had a choice, knowing that it mattered what made me feel safe, I felt so good, and it just dropped my nervous system stress immediately, and I could start problem solving more creatively so I could approach it from a place of love.
Something that I think is really important in that is that, as we're inquiring, how do we create psychological safety in our companies? One of the most important things for us to learn is how do we repair? How do we actually do pattern interrupts and have it from going into a downward spiral and into an upward spiral? And that's a fine art. in best self-management, we talk about the need for cultivating relational mastery. And there's so much inside of that, but like the art of repair, because shit's going to break down. I guarantee it. There's going to be moments where we feel unsafe, where we get interrupted, where we don't feel listened to, and being able to then interrupt and, well, maybe not interrupt, but stop that downward spiral and do the work to reverse it is critical.
Absolutely. I think personal resilience has been the thing that's meant the most to me. For as many times as I've had a challenging situation in life, or I got knocked down, or had a rough month for my mental health, being able to recharge my batteries and come back at it with a fresh mind, that personal resilience is so important. And I've seen it happen on teams of 5 or 10 or teams of 20 or 30 and even larger. And I like seeing it more and more in organizations as large as yours and others is how can we be resilient? What if we mess up publicly? Or what if we mess up interpersonally on our teams? And are we willing to pause the harm and figure out how we can do it better and grow from there?
Along this theme of coming from a place of love, so really, my personal journey has been rewiring my own human operating system from a wiring of fear to a wiring of love. And I think it takes a lifetime to really unpack all of that. As Shane mentioned, it's been generations and generations. It's been passed down of a place of fear, of not enoughness or scarcity or comparing ourselves to others and, having our self-worth be tied to material things. And so I think at the end of the day, it's a matter of learning to really fully accept who you authentically are and not hide behind a veil of who society has told you to be. So just wanted to share that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you both coming up here and sharing some of your personal experiences and also how you've taken that to infuse this company with so much care. It seems if the smiles on all of the employees' faces mean anything, I think you're doing a really beautiful job with that. And I so appreciate you having this conversation with me today.
I'll just finish with saying that I think it's incredibly exciting what's happening in the world because it's just the beginning. In 10 years, I think that right now, this is somewhat of a fringe conversation and that's happening in certain companies, but this is not going to, I don't think we're going to go backwards. I really think we're going to see exponential movement in the rehumanization of our companies and our organizations. And so it's an incredibly exciting time to be in business.
Thank you.